Black billionaire was denied a service at a bank because they believe he doesn't look rich enough to be operating such accounts with billions in it. He closed his account with the bank, which made them to shut down. A lesson learned the hard way. The manager who thinks to himself he is God over men said to Marcus, "Son, I think there might be some confusion here. This is premium banking, not check cashing. Perhaps you're looking for the community branch down the street." Those words cost Pinnacle Financial $3 billion and nearly destroyed 2 hearts in the process. Marcus Blackwood looked like any other young black man in a hoodie when he walked into that Chicago bank, but appearances deceived everyone, including the brilliant analyst who watched his humiliation unfold. In 60 devastating minutes, prejudice triggered a financial catastrophe that made national headlines. Yet the real story isn't about money or revenge. It's about wounded souls finding love in the wreckage of institutional racism. Will pride destroy the only genuine connection either has felt in years? Some accounts can't be closed with wire transfers. They require courage, vulnerability, and choosing trust over trauma. Please, before I continue with this story, do me a favor by subscribing to this channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now relax and listen to the full breakdown of what happened in the story. The morning fog clung to the windows of Pinnacle Financial's downtown Chicago branch like unspoken doubts, and Jasmine Williams pressed her palm against the cool glass as she watched another day begin. 3 years behind the premium accounts desk, and she still felt the weight of eyes measuring her worth. Customers who glanced at her natural hair, her dark skin, and made instant calculations about her competence. She'd learned to armor herself in crisp blazers and flawless service, but some days the armor felt heavy. Williams, client in 15, barked Mr. Thornfield from his corner office, not bothering to look up from his computer. She nodded, straightening files that were already perfect, a nervous habit that betrayed the confidence she projected. 20 miles across the city, Marcus Blackwood stood in his penthouse shower, letting scalding water wash away another sleepless night. The Forbes article sat folded on his bathroom counter. Tech mogul's revolutionary AI platform nets $3.2 billion, but the numbers felt hollow. Success had insulated him from many things, but not from the way restaurant hosts hesitated before seating him, the way security guards shadowed him in high-end stores, the way people's faces changed when they discovered his wealth, as if money could somehow erase the color of his skin or the assumptions that came with it. He reached for his usual uniform, faded jeans, a simple gray hoodie, worn sneakers that had carried him through Stanford's computer labs years ago. His assistant Priya had begged him to dress differently for public appearances, but comfort mattered more than image. Real power, he'd learned, didn't need costume jewelry. Back at Pinnacle Financial, Jasmine reviewed the morning's appointment list. A significant withdrawal, 8 figures that would require manager approval and careful documentation. She'd handled large transactions before, but this one made her nervous. Mr. Thornfield had been particularly sharp lately, scrutinizing every interaction with premium clients, and she couldn't afford mistakes. "Remember," he'd told her yesterday, leaning too close to her desk, his cologne suffocating, "our clients expect a certain presentation. This isn't community banking, Williams. These people notice everything." The implication stung, but she'd swallowed it like she swallowed so many others. She needed this job, needed the experience, needed the thin thread of stability it provided while she finished her evening MBA classes. Dreams of opening her own financial consulting firm sustained her through days like these. Marcus pulled into the bank's parking garage, choosing a spot near the back. Bentley felt ostentatious today, a gift from his board of directors that he'd accepted out of politeness but rarely enjoyed. He preferred his old Honda, but it was in the shop, victim of Chicago's brutal winters and 200,000 honest miles. His phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Goldman Sachs, 2 from his attorney, 1 from his mother asking when he'd finally settle down and give her grandchildren. He ignored them all. Today's task was simple: close the Pinnacle account and transfer everything to the credit union that had supported his startup when bigger banks wouldn't return his calls. Loyalty mattered, even in business. Especially in business. Jasmine watched through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows as a young black man approached the entrance. Hoodie up, hands in pockets, moving with the careful awareness that came from navigating spaces that might not welcome you. Something about his posture, straight back despite the casual clothes, reminded her of her father coming home from long days at the factory, dignity intact despite the world's efforts to strip it away. The security guard, Patterson, shifted in his chair, hand drifting toward his radio. Jasmine had seen that movement before, had felt the toxic electricity of suspicion crackling through the marble lobby whenever someone who didn't belong entered their pristine domain. Marcus paused at the entrance, studying his reflection in the brass-framed glass. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. "Boy, you carry yourself like you own the world because you do. Don't let anybody make you small." She died before seeing his success, but her words remained his foundation. He pushed through the doors into the hushed cathedral of American banking, all gleaming surfaces and whispered conversations, where money moved like prayers through digital clouds. The lobby smelled of leather and ambition, but underneath lurked something else, the acrid scent of judgment, familiar as his own heartbeat. Jasmine stood as he approached her desk, a professional smile masking the flutter of recognition, not of him specifically, but of the moment's weight. She'd learned to read the signs, the slight stiffening of other employees, the way conversations paused, the invisible barriers that rose when someone didn't fit their narrow definition of wealth. "Good morning," she said, her voice warm despite the chill she felt spreading through the room. "How may I help you today? What first impressions do we carry about people, and how do those snap judgments shape the moments that follow?" Marcus settled into the leather chair across from Jasmine's desk, the soft creak of expensive furniture filling the silence between them. She noticed his hands first, calloused despite obvious intelligence, fingers that had built something real rather than inherited it. When he pulled back his hood, revealing close-cropped hair and eyes that held both weariness and determination, she felt something shift in her chest. "I need to close my accounts," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decisions made in sleepless hours. "All of them." Jasmine's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. "May I have your account information, sir?" He slid a worn leather wallet from his pocket, not the designer accessory she expected from premium clients, but something practical, probably carried for years. The debit card he placed on her desk was black titanium, the kind reserved for accounts she'd only heard whispered about in training sessions. She entered the card number, and her screen exploded with digits. $3,247,891,432.18. The number hung in the air between them like a held breath. Jasmine blinked, certain she'd misread, but the account balance remained stubbornly, impossibly real. Her training kicked in, maintaining professionalism, never reacting to client wealth, but her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through months of transactions that read like a tour of global financial markets. "Mr." She glanced at the screen. "Mr. Blackwood, this will require manager approval for. Is there a problem?" The voice came from behind Marcus, sharp as winter wind. Mr. Thornfield approached with the predatory confidence of a man who'd never questioned his right to occupy space. His eyes swept over Marcus, the hoodie, the worn jeans, the audacity of sitting in a chair meant for their appropriate clientele. "Williams, what's the nature of this consultation?" Jasmine felt the familiar knot in her stomach tighten. "Mr. Blackwood would like to close his accounts, sir." "I was just—" "Accounts?" Thornfield's laugh was sharp, dismissive. He moved closer to Marcus, using height and proximity as weapons. "Son, I think there might be some confusion here. This is premium banking, not check cashing. Perhaps you're looking for the community branch down the street." The air in the lobby seemed to crystallize. Conversations at nearby desks stopped mid-sentence. Even Patterson, the security guard, straightened, his hand moving toward his radio with practiced ease. Marcus remained perfectly still, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "There's no confusion. I'd like to close my accounts." Today. Thornfield's face flushed red. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but... Sir. Jasmine's voice cut through the tension, stronger than she felt. The account is legitimate. Mr. Blackwood has over $3 billion with us. The silence that followed was deafening. Thornfield's eyes snapped to her screen, his face cycling through disbelief, recognition, and panic in rapid succession. Around the lobby, other employees craned their necks, drawn by the spectacle of their manager's confidence crumbling in real time. That's impossible, Thornfield stammered, leaning over Jasmine's shoulder to stare at the numbers. There must be some mistake. We don't have any clients someone like... He gestured vaguely at Marcus, his prejudice laid bare for everyone to witness. Marcus stood slowly, his movement deliberate and measured. At his full height, he looked down at Thornfield with the quiet dignity of a man who'd endured this dance too many times to be surprised by its steps. Someone like me? His voice carried years of accumulated hurt transformed into steel. You're right, Mr. Thornfield. After today you won't. Jasmine watched the exchange with growing horror and admiration. She'd witnessed discrimination before, subtle slights, coded language, the 1,000 small cuts that people like her and Marcus endured daily. But rarely had she seen it so blatantly displayed, and never had she watched someone respond with such controlled power. Thornfield scrambled for recovery, his practiced smile returning like a badly fitted mask. Mr. Blackwood, please, there's been a misunderstanding. As our valued client. Valued? Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. 5 minutes ago, I was looking for check cashing. What changed, Mr. Thornfield? The numbers on that screen, or the color of my skin? The question hung in the air like smoke, impossible to clear. Jasmine felt her heart hammering against her ribs, caught between professional obligation and moral clarity. Around the lobby, she could feel other employees watching, some with embarrassment, others with the sick fascination of witnessing a car crash. Please, Thornfield's voice cracked slightly. Let's discuss this in my office. Privately. No. Marcus turned back to Jasmine, his eyes finding hers across the minefield of institutional bias. Ms. Williams will handle the closure. Right here. Right now. In that moment, their eyes met fully for the first time, and Jasmine felt something electric pass between them. Recognition, respect, shared understanding of what it meant to navigate spaces that questioned their right to exist. He wasn't just a client demanding service. He was a man choosing dignity over convenience, using his power not as a weapon, but as a shield for every person who looked like them and lacked his resources. Her fingers found the keyboard with a new purpose. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. I'll process the account closure immediately. As she began typing, she felt the weight of Thornfield's fury beside her, the ripple of shock through the lobby, and something else. The warmth of Marcus's quiet smile, acknowledgement that she'd chosen to stand with him rather than hide behind corporate protocol. The transaction would take hours to complete, but the real change had already begun. The clicking of Jasmine's keyboard filled the suffocating silence as she began the account closure process, her professional mask firmly in place despite the chaos swirling in her chest. She told herself this was just another transaction. Complicated, yes, but manageable with proper procedure. She refused to acknowledge the way her pulse quickened each time Marcus shifted in his chair, or how Thornfield's hovering presence made her skin crawl with second-hand shame. The wire transfer authorization will require multiple signatures, she said, her voice steady even as her hands trembled slightly. Given the amount, we'll need to follow federal reporting protocols. Marcus nodded, pulling out his phone to check messages he'd been ignoring all morning. Goldman Sachs again. His attorney. The persistent buzz of a world that demanded his attention. He focused on the screen, using familiar business rhythms to distance himself from the moment's emotional weight. This was just money moving, he told himself. Numbers changing hands. Nothing more. But his jaw remained tight, and Jasmine noticed how his free hand curled into a loose fist on his thigh. Mr. Blackwood. Thornfield's voice oozed false warmth as he pulled up a chair uninvited. Perhaps we can discuss alternatives. As one of our premier clients, you're entitled to certain considerations. Private banking services, perhaps? A dedicated relationship manager? The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. 10 minutes ago, Marcus had been directed to community banking. Now he was premier client material. I've made my decision, Marcus replied without looking up from his phone, but Jasmine caught the slight tightening around his eyes. He was fighting something, anger, disappointment, the familiar ache of being seen as threatening until proven profitable. Jasmine's fingers paused over the keyboard. The rational part of her mind screamed warnings. Don't get involved, don't make waves, protect your job. She had student loans, rent, a mother in Detroit who depended on her occasional help. This wasn't her fight. But the other part, the part that remembered her father's quiet dignity in the face of daily slights, the part that had watched her own worth questioned countless times, that part whispered different counsel. The process will take approximately 4 hours, she said, addressing Marcus directly while ignoring Thornfield's increasingly frantic gestures. You're welcome to wait in our VIP lounge, or I can call you when everything's ready for final signature. 4 hours. Thornfield's voice cracked. Surely we can expedite. Federal regulations, Jasmine cut him off smoothly. Large transfers require verification periods. There's no way around it. She was lying, and they all knew it. The transfer could be completed in 40 minutes with the right authorizations. But something in her wanted to drag this out, to make Thornfield squirm in the bed he'd made, to give Marcus time to reconsider if he chose to. Marcus looked up from his phone, studying her face with new attention. 4 hours, he repeated slowly, and she caught the hint of a question in his tone. Minimum, she confirmed, meeting his gaze directly. Thornfield pushed back from his chair with visible frustration. Williams, in my office. Now. I need to complete the preliminary documentation first, sir. Bank policy. The documentation can wait. Actually, it can't. Marcus's voice carried quiet authority. Ms. Williams is correct about federal requirements. Any delay in proper procedure could trigger compliance issues. He smiled slightly, the expression sharp enough to cut glass. I'm sure you understand the regulatory implications better than anyone, Mr. Thornfield. The trapped look in Thornfield's eyes was almost worth the awkwardness that followed. He couldn't argue with regulations, especially not in front of a client who clearly understood the system better than he did. Of course, Thornfield muttered. Williams, proceed with proper documentation. As he stalked away, Marcus leaned forward slightly. 4 hours seems like a long time to sit in a bank. Jasmine kept her eyes on her screen, afraid that looking at him directly would crack her professional facade. The VIP lounge has comfortable seating, coffee, current financial publications. And if I preferred somewhere else? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. She could feel other employees watching, and could practically hear the gossip mill spinning to life. Jasmine Williams, the girl from Detroit who'd worked her way through college, talking to a billionaire like they were equals. Like they were something more. I have lunch at noon, she said quietly, still not looking up. There's a small cafe 3 blocks east. Quiet. Good coffee. Marcus was silent for so long she wondered if she'd misread the moment entirely. When she finally risked a glance, he was studying her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Noon, he said finally, standing to leave. I'll find it. As he walked toward the lobby exit, Jasmine felt the weight of every eye in the building following his movement. She'd crossed a line, professional, personal, possibly both. The smart thing would be to call him back, suggest he wait in the lounge, and maintain appropriate client boundaries. Instead, she watched him push through the brass-framed doors and disappear into the Chicago morning, taking her sense of caution with him. Thornfield appeared at her elbow like a bad omen. What exactly did you just arrange with that client, Williams? Lunch, she said simply, returning to her keyboard with hands that no longer shook. I take it every day at noon. Bank policy. The lie tasted like freedom on her tongue. The cafe Marcus found was nothing like the polished establishments he usually frequented. No exposed brick or Edison bulbs, just worn linoleum floors and fluorescent lighting that hummed like tired insects. Rosie's corner diner proclaimed faded letters on the window, and through the glass he could see checkered tablecloths and coffee cups thick enough to survive nuclear war. He almost kept walking. This wasn't his world, despite what Thornfield assumed about his origins. Success had buffered him from places like this for years, surrounding him with the tasteful minimalism of executive dining rooms and exclusive clubs where conversations happened in hushed tones over $70 steaks. But something about the diner's honest shabbiness appealed to him today. No pretense, no performance, just coffee and whatever truth he and Jasmine Williams might find between them. At 12:03, she appeared in the doorway, having traded her banking blazer for a soft cardigan that made her look younger, more approachable. She spotted him in a corner booth and hesitated, probably questioning the same impulse that had brought him here. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Neither was I." The waitress, actually Rosie, according to her name tag, shuffled over with the resigned efficiency of someone who'd been pouring coffee since the Clinton administration. "What can I get you kids?" "Just coffee," Jasmine said. "Make it two," Marcus added, then caught Rosie's skeptical glance at his expensive watch. "And pie. Whatever you recommend. Apples fresh. Lemon meringue's questionable." Rosie shrugged. "Your funeral." When she left, silence settled between them like dust. Through the window, Marcus watched Chicago's lunch crowd hurry past, men in $1,000 suits clutching phones, women in heels that clicked against concrete like countdown timers. His world. His people. None of them would pause to eat pie in a place like this. "You could have completed the transfer in an hour," he said finally. Jasmine's hands wrapped around her coffee mug as if seeking warmth. "Federal regulations are flexible for accounts like mine." He studied her face, noting the way she avoided his eyes. "So why the delay?" She was quiet so long he thought she might not answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible above the diner's ambient noise. "Because what happened back there was wrong. And because—" she paused, seeming to gather courage. "Because I've never seen someone handle ignorance with such grace." The compliment hit him unexpectedly, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Grace. That's an interesting word for it. What would you call it?" "Survival." He leaned back against the cracked vinyl booth. "You learn to choose your battles when you look like me and carry the money I do. Anger is expensive. Grace is practical." Rosie returned with pie that looked homemade and delicious, despite her warnings about the lemon meringue. She lingered, clearly curious about the odd pairing they presented, the overdressed businessman and the professional woman sharing coffee like old friends. "You two look familiar," she mused. "Have you been here before?" "First time," Jasmine said quickly. "Huh. Well, holler if you need anything." Rosie wandered off, leaving them to their awkward intimacy. Marcus took a bite of apple pie, surprised by its perfection. "This is incredible." "Everything's not always what it appears to be," Jasmine said, and he caught the double meaning. "No, it's not." He set down his fork, studying her. "You could have stayed quiet back there. Let Thornfield handle it his way. Safer for you." She bristled slightly. "You think I was protecting you? Weren't you?" "I was protecting myself." The admission seemed to surprise her. "I was protecting the part of me that still believes banking should be about helping people, not judging them. The part that remembers why I got into finance in the first place." "Which was?" "My grandmother." A smile softened her features. "She kept her money in a coffee can under her bed because she didn't trust banks. Said they weren't made for people like us. I wanted to prove her wrong." Marcus felt something shift between them, a recognition deeper than their shared experience of discrimination. "Did you prove her wrong?" Jasmine's laugh was rueful. "Most days I think she was right. But then someone like you walks in, and I remember that the system's broken, not the people in it. Someone like me. Someone who built something real. Who didn't inherit wealth or steal it or stumble into it. Someone who earned the right to walk into any bank in the world and be treated with respect." Her words carried a weight that surprised him. Not the usual deference his money commanded, but something more valuable, genuine admiration for his journey rather than its destination. "The account closure," he said carefully. "It's not just about Thornfield's behavior, is it?" She shook her head. "I've been thinking about leaving Pinnacle for months. What happened today just confirmed what I already knew. I don't belong there." "Where do you belong?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Outside, the lunch crowd was thinning, office workers returning to their corporate towers and corner offices. Soon, she'd have to go back too, face Thornfield's questions and the gossip mills grinding gears. "I don't know yet," she said finally, "but I'm starting to think that's okay." Marcus found himself leaning forward, drawn by her honesty and the way afternoon light caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes. For the first time in years, he felt present in a moment that belonged entirely to him, not scheduled by assistants or choreographed for business purposes. "The transfer," he said. "Maybe it doesn't have to happen today after all." They'd been sitting in Rosie's corner diner for nearly 2 hours, the afternoon sun slanting through grimy windows and casting everything in amber light. The lunch crowd had long since departed, leaving them in a bubble of intimacy punctuated only by the distant clatter of dishes and Rosie's occasional refills of coffee that had grown progressively stronger and more bitter. Marcus found himself studying Jasmine's hands as she spoke, elegant fingers that moved expressively when she talked about her evening MBA classes, the consulting firm she dreamed of opening, the way she'd grown up watching her father come home from the auto plant with dignity, intact despite daily humiliations. "He never complained," she said, tracing patterns on the condensation of her water glass. "Not once. But I saw how it wore on him, the way supervisors talked to him, the way his ideas got dismissed until some white engineer repeated them verbatim. He taught me that respect isn't something you wait for, it's something you demand quietly through excellence." Marcus nodded, understanding flooding through him. "My grandmother used to say something similar. Boy, you make them need you before they respect you, but don't ever confuse the two." "Smart woman. The smartest." His voice grew distant, memory pulling him backward. "She raised me after my parents died. A car accident when I was 8. She was a domestic worker, cleaned houses in Evanston for families who had more money than God and less gratitude than most." Jasmine's hand stilled on her glass. "I'm sorry. She used to take me with her sometimes during summer breaks. I'd sit in these massive kitchens doing homework while she scrubbed floors that were already spotless." He smiled ruefully. "Those kids, the ones whose rooms she cleaned, they went to private schools, had tutors, college funds that existed before they could walk. And I remember thinking that someday I'd have enough money that my kids would never have to watch their grandmother work herself into the ground for people who barely saw her as human." The weight of revelation settled between them. Jasmine reached across the table instinctively, her fingers covering him briefly before she caught herself and pulled back. The contact left heat in its wake. "Is that why you started the company? The AI platform?" "Partly." Marcus's phone buzzed. Another call from Goldman Sachs, but he silenced it without looking. "I wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away, couldn't be dismissed or diminished because of how I looked or where I came from. Code doesn't care about skin color. Algorithms don't have bias unless humans program it in. But humans still run the companies that buy your technology." "True." He met her eyes directly. "Which is why I chose my investors carefully. Why I maintained controlling interest even when venture capitalists threw around numbers that made my grandmother's heavens seem small. Money talks, but control speaks louder." Jasmine absorbed this, understanding dawning in her expression. "The account closure. It's not just about Thornfield's prejudice, is it? It's about power." $3 billion is a significant loss for a regional bank, Marcus confirmed. Pinnacle's stock will take a hit. Thornfield will face uncomfortable questions from his board. And maybe the next young black professional who walks through those doors will be treated with the respect they deserve from the start. The pragmatic brutality of it was breathtaking. Jasmine had witnessed discrimination, had endured it herself, but she'd never seen someone with the power to exact such swift, comprehensive justice. It was admirable and terrifying in equal measure. "What about the collateral damage?" she asked quietly. "Other employees who lose their jobs when the stock falls? People like me who depend on those paychecks." The question hit him like cold water. He'd been so focused on the righteousness of his position that he hadn't fully considered the ripple effects. Pinnacle employed hundreds of people, many of them probably decent individuals caught in a flawed system. "You think I'm wrong," he said, not quite making it a question. "I think you're hurt," she replied carefully. "And I think hurt people sometimes make decisions that feel like justice but look like revenge from the outside." Her words stung because they contained truth he didn't want to examine. How many times had he used his wealth as a weapon, justified by past slights and present inequities? How often had he confused power with righteousness? "My grandmother died 3 years ago," he said suddenly. "Cancer. She was in the hospital for weeks, and I paid for everything, private rooms, the best doctors, experimental treatments. But none of it mattered when the nurses looked at her like she was just another old black woman taking up space." Jasmine's breath caught. "Marcus, the day she died, I was in a board meeting. Goldman Sachs wanted to discuss the IPO timeline, and I told myself the call could wait an hour. 1 hour." His voice cracked slightly. "She died while I was explaining market projections to men who would never understand what she meant to me." The confession hung between them like a raw wound. Jasmine felt tears threatening, not just for his loss, but for the weight he'd been carrying. Success that felt hollow because the person who'd made it possible wasn't there to witness it. "She would have been proud," Jasmine said softly. "Would she? Or would she have told me that using money to hurt people, even people who deserve it, makes me just another rich man with a grudge?" The question revealed the crack in his armor, the uncertainty beneath the controlled fury that had driven him to Pinnacle that morning. For all his success, he was still the 8-year-old boy who'd lost everything, still seeking approval from a woman who existed now only in memory and moral echo. Jasmine looked at him across the scarred table, seeing not the billionaire or the wronged customer, but the man caught between justice and vengeance, between power and compassion. "Maybe," she said carefully, "the question isn't what she would think. Maybe it's what you want your legacy to be." The question about legacy hung in the air between them as Rosie approached with the coffee pot for what must have been the 7th time. The afternoon had melted into early evening, and the diner's fluorescent lights seemed softer now, more forgiving. "Are you kids planning to buy the place, or just rent it by the hour?" Rosie asked with gruff affection, refilling their cups. Marcus looked around, suddenly aware of how long they'd been sitting there. "Sorry, we should probably." "Relax, honey. I've seen worse dates than this." Rosie winked at Jasmine, though usually they involve more crying and throwing food. After she left, they sat in embarrassed silence until Jasmine started laughing, a real laugh that transformed her face completely, erasing the careful professionalism she wore like armor. "A date," she said, shaking her head. "Is that what this is?" "I honestly don't know what this is," Marcus admitted, and the honesty in his voice made something flutter in her chest. "I haven't had a conversation like this in years, maybe." "What are your conversations usually like?" "Shorter, more expensive, usually involving lawyers or board members telling me what I want to hear." He stirred his coffee absently. "When you have money like mine, genuine interaction becomes a luxury more rare than anything you can buy." Jasmine studied his profile as he spoke, noting the loneliness that had crept into his voice. "That sounds isolating." "It is, but isolation felt safer than vulnerability for a long time." He met her eyes. "Until today." The admission sent warmth through her, dangerous and unwelcome. She'd spent 3 years at Pinnacle learning to keep professional distance, to smile without engaging, to be helpful without being human. But something about Marcus, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness with his pain, made those boundaries feel arbitrary. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. When you walked into the bank this morning, what did you expect to happen?" Marcus considered this carefully. "Honestly, I expected exactly what happened. I've been disappointing myself with hope for years, so I've learned to anticipate the worst. It hurts less. But you went anyway. I went anyway. He smiled ruefully. My grandmother used to say that expecting disappointment was just another form of giving up. Boy, she'd tell me, you walk into every room like you belong there because you do. And if they don't see it, that's their blindness, not your inadequacy. She sounds like she was quite a woman. She was everything. His voice grew soft with memory. She worked double shifts to pay for my computer classes, saved every penny for my Stanford application fees. When I got the scholarship, she cried for 3 days straight, said she'd finally done something that mattered. Jasmine felt her heart constrict. She was wrong about that last part. Was she? Marcus, she raised you. She taught you dignity and determination and grace under pressure. She mattered every single day she was in your life. The words seemed to hit him physically, his shoulders relaxing as if he'd been holding tension he didn't realize was there. When he looked at her, his eyes held a vulnerability that made her breath catch. I keep thinking about what you said earlier, he murmured. About hurting people making decisions that feel like justice but look like revenge. Maybe I've been confusing the two for longer than I want to admit. What would justice look like instead? I don't know. Something that honors her memory without creating more pain. He paused, then pulled out his phone. May I show you something? She nodded, and he scrolled through his photos until he found what he was looking for. An image of a small, elegant black woman in a church dress, her arm around a gangly teenager in an oversized graduation cap. Stanford graduation, he said. She was so proud, she made me take pictures with every person we met that day. This was the last one. Jasmine studied the photo, seeing the love and pride radiating from the older woman's face, the way young Marcus leaned into her embrace like she was his entire world. She's beautiful. She was. And strong. And kinder than anyone had a right to be after the life she'd lived. He put the phone away. She used to feed stray cats behind our apartment building, even though we could barely afford groceries. Said every living thing deserved compassion, especially the ones the world had given up on. Like she gave you compassion when the world gave up on you. Exactly. He met Jasmine's eyes. I think she'd be disappointed in the man I've become. Not the success, she'd love that. But the hardness. The way I use power as protection instead of purpose. Jasmine reached across the table again, this time not pulling back when her fingers found him. It's not too late to change that. The contact sent electricity through both of them, a connection that went beyond shared experience or mutual attraction. It felt like recognition, like coming home to a place they'd never been but somehow always known. The account, Marcus said quietly, not moving his hand from under hers. What if I didn't close it? What would you do instead? I don't know yet. Something that would make her proud. Something that would help people like us navigate spaces that weren't built for us. He turned his hand palm up, his fingers intertwining with hers. Maybe something that would give brilliant women like you the chance to build the businesses you dream about. The possibility hung between them like dawn breaking, full of potential and fragile as spun glass. Jasmine felt her careful boundaries dissolving, replaced by something that felt suspiciously like hope. That, she said softly, sounds like justice. Outside, Chicago's evening rush had begun, but inside Rosie's Corner Diner, time seemed suspended in amber light and coffee-scented possibility. Marcus's phone had been buzzing insistently for the past 20 minutes, but he'd ignored it, lost in the warmth of Jasmine's touch and the possibility that maybe, for the first time in years, he'd found someone who saw him as more than his bank balance or his achievements. Someone who challenged him to be better. Then Jasmine's phone rang. I should take this, she said reluctantly, glancing at the screen. It's my supervisor. As she answered, Marcus finally checked his messages. 17 missed calls. 12 voicemails. His stomach dropped as he read the subject lines of increasingly frantic emails from his attorney, his board members, and his assistant. Williams, where the hell are you? Thornfield's voice carried clearly through Jasmine's phone, sharp with panic. The wire transfer, something's gone wrong. The compliance department is asking questions, and Mr. Blackwood's attorney is demanding immediate completion of the closure. We need you back here now. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins as he scrolled through his messages. His attorney's voicemail was brief and devastating. Marcus, call me immediately. Someone leaked information about the Pinnacle situation to the financial press. Stocks already down 12% in after-hours trading. This is a disaster. Jasmine hung up, her face pale. We have to go back. There's some kind of emergency with your account. I know. His voice was flat, the warmth from moments before evaporating like steam. My attorney says it's been leaked to the press. They stared at each other across the table, the implications hitting them simultaneously. A story this big, Billionaire closes accounts due to discrimination, would be front-page news by morning. Pinnacle's stock would crater. Jobs would be lost. And at the center of it all would be Marcus Blackwood, the angry black man who destroyed a century-old institution over a moment of prejudice. How did the press find out? Jasmine asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. Marcus's phone rang again. His publicist this time, calling from New York with barely controlled hysteria in her voice. Marcus, please tell me you didn't actually close a $3 billion account because a bank manager was rude to you. Please tell me the Tribune got this wrong. As the call ended, Jasmine watched Marcus's face transform. The vulnerability she'd witnessed, the gentle man who'd shared memories of his grandmother, disappeared behind a mask of cold fury. Someone at the bank leaked this, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Someone who knew about our conversation, about the account details, about... His eyes found hers, and she saw the exact moment suspicion crystallized into accusation. About my change of heart. Marcus, no. I would never. Wouldn't you? He leaned back, studying her like she was a puzzle he'd been foolish to trust. 3 hours ago, you were just another bank employee trying to keep her job. Now suddenly you're invested in my personal transformation, in convincing me not to close the account. The words hit her like physical blows. You think I was manipulating you? I think I've been incredibly naive. His laugh was bitter, self-directed. God, I should have seen this coming. The convenient delay with the transfer. The lunch invitation. The way you seemed so understanding, so different from everyone else at that bank. Jasmine felt tears threatening, but anger was stronger. Different how, Marcus? What exactly do you think I am? I think you're very good at your job, which apparently includes damage control for clients worth billions to your employer. He stood abruptly, tossing money on the table with casual dismissal. How much is Thornfield paying you for this performance? Or was it the bank's board? Someone's certainly getting their money's worth. Stop. The word came out sharper than she intended, drawing stares from other patrons. Just stop and think about what you're saying. I'm saying I've been played by an expert. I'm saying every word, every touch, every vulnerable moment was calculated to keep me from destroying Pinnacle's stock price. His voice grew colder with each accusation. I'm saying you figured out exactly what this lonely, angry billionaire needed to hear to change his mind. The cruelty of it took her breath away. Not just the accusations, but the reduction of everything they'd shared to a financial transaction. Every moment of genuine connection reframed as manipulation. You want to know what I think? Jasmine stood to face him, her professional composure finally cracking. I think you're so used to people wanting your money that you can't recognize when someone just wants you. I think you're so afraid of being vulnerable that you'd rather believe I'm a con artist than accept that someone might actually care about the man behind the bank account. Care about me? His smile was sharp enough to cut. You've known me for 6 hours, Jasmine. Whatever you think you feel, don't you dare tell me what I feel. Her voice carried the weight of every slight she'd endured, every assumption she'd faced, every time her authenticity had been questioned. I shared my dreams with you, my family, my grandmother's story. Was that manipulation too? Maybe. You tell me. He pulled out his phone. Because in about 2 hours, this story's going to be everywhere. And either you're the most unlucky woman in Chicago, or you're very good at your job. The implication hung between them like poison. Around the diner, conversations had stopped. Even Rosie watched from behind the counter, her usual warmth replaced by uncomfortable awareness that she was witnessing something break apart in real time. "Get out," Jasmine whispered. "What?" "Get out. Go back to your isolated tower and your bought friendships and your grandmother's disappointed ghost. Go be the angry, vengeful man you're so determined to be." Tears were flowing now, but her voice remained steady. "Just leave me out of it." Marcus hesitated, something flickering behind his eyes. Regret, maybe, or recognition of the line he'd just crossed. But pride and wounded trust won out. "Gladly," he said, and walked away without looking back. In the silence that followed, Jasmine collapsed back into the booth, surrounded by the wreckage of something that had felt like hope. Marcus sat in his penthouse office at 2 a.m., Lake Michigan stretching endlessly beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's lights blurred by exhaustion and something that might have been tears. The financial report spread across his glass desk told the story in brutal numbers. Pinnacle's stock had fallen 18%. 300 employees would likely lose their jobs by week's weekend. The domino effect had already begun. His laptop screen showed 17 news articles, each one painting him as either a righteous crusader or a vindictive billionaire, depending on the publication's politics. None of them got it right. None of them understood that 6 hours ago, he'd been ready to choose compassion over conquest, to build instead of destroy. His phone lay silent beside him, 17 missed calls from reporters and 0 from the one person whose voice he actually wanted to hear. The press had gotten the story from someone at the bank, security footage, transaction records, even quotes from the diner. Someone had been thorough, professional, and devastating. Someone who understood exactly how to craft a narrative that would maximize damage while maintaining plausible deniability. Someone like Jasmine. The thought felt like swallowing glass, but logic demanded he consider it. She'd delayed the transfer. She'd convinced him to reconsider. She'd been perfectly positioned to gather every detail needed for a comprehensive leak. The timing was surgical in its precision. But then he remembered her tears in the diner. The way her voice broke when she told him about her grandmother. The warmth in her eyes when she looked at his photo. Either she was the most gifted actress he'd ever encountered, or he'd made the worst mistake of his life. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. "Boy, fear makes fools of smart men. When your heart tells you one thing and your hurt tells you another, listen closely to which one's speaking from love and which one's speaking from wounds." Marcus closed his eyes, trying to separate truth from trauma, but 3 decades of disappointment made poor advisors. How many times had people pretended to care about him until they discovered his worth? How often had genuine seeming connections revealed themselves as elaborate performances designed to separate him from his money? But Jasmine hadn't asked for money, hadn't suggested investments or business opportunities or charitable donations. She'd simply seen him as human, challenged him to be better, and made him want to try. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd accused her of manipulation while engaging in the cruelest manipulation of all, taking her genuine emotions and twisting them into evidence of betrayal. Across the city, Jasmine sat on her tiny apartment's fire escape, watching sunrise paint the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and regret. She'd cried herself empty hours ago, leaving behind only the hollow ache of something beautiful destroyed before it had a chance to bloom. Her phone showed 43 missed calls from reporters, colleagues, and Mr. Thornfield, who'd left increasingly frantic voicemails about damage control and media management. She'd ignored them all, focused instead on the single call she'd received from her mother in Detroit. "Baby girl, I saw the news. You okay?" "I'm fine, Mama. Don't lie to your mother." "What happened?" So Jasmine had told her everything. The discrimination, the connection, the accusation, the heartbreak. Her mother had listened without judgment, the way she always did, before offering the wisdom that came from surviving 60 years in a world that questioned her worth daily. Some people get so used to fighting that they forget how to lay down their weapons, even when they're safe. That man's been hurt, baby. Doesn't excuse what he said, but it explains it. It doesn't matter now. He thinks I'm a liar. What do you think? I think I was stupid to believe someone like him could care about someone like me. Someone like you? Her mother's voice sharpened. Jasmine Marie Williams, you are brilliant and kind and beautiful and strong. Any man who can't see that is the one with the problem, not you. Now, watching the sun rise over a city that felt suddenly foreign, Jasmine wondered if her mother was right. Maybe the problem wasn't her worthiness, but his ability to recognize it. Maybe loving someone meant accepting that their wounds might make them strike out, even at the people trying to heal them. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Found your number through the bank directory. This is investigative reporter Jake Morrison, Chicago Tribune. The Pinnacle leak came from bank security. Thornfield ordered surveillance on high-value transactions after yesterday's incident. Thought you should know. Your story deserves to be told accurately. Jasmine stared at the message, vindication and heartbreak warring in her chest. She'd been cleared of suspicion by someone who didn't even know her, while the man she'd opened her heart to had condemned her without evidence. She thought about calling Marcus, sending him the message, proving her innocence. But pride and hurt held her back. If he could believe the worst of her so easily, what foundation could they possibly build on? The morning news was playing on her neighbor's television through thin walls, and she caught fragments. Billionaire's discrimination claim. Bank stock plummets. Calls for investigation. She thought about all the Pinnacle employees who'd lose their jobs, the families affected by one man's wounded pride and another man's prejudice. She thought about the system that created such moments, that forced people to choose between dignity and survival. And she thought about Marcus, alone in his tower of success and isolation, probably convincing himself that being right about her betrayal justified destroying what they'd begun to build. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a number she recognized. Marcus. Her finger hovered over the screen, choice crystallizing into a moment that would determine whether love or hurt would write the ending to their story. How do we choose to respond when the people we care about wound us from their own pain? Jasmine answered on the fourth ring, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Hello. I'm standing outside your building. Marcus's voice was rough, stripped of its usual controlled confidence. I've been here for an hour, trying to find the courage to call. She looked down from her fire escape perch and saw him, a lone figure on the empty sidewalk, shoulders hunched against the morning cold, looking smaller somehow than the man who'd commanded Pinnacle's lobby 12 hours ago. Why are you here? Because I've spent the last 6 hours learning the difference between being smart and being wise. He tilted his head up, finding her among the maze of fire escapes and laundry lines. And because my grandmother would be ashamed of the man I was in that diner. The wind carried his words up to her, along with the distant sounds of a city waking up, garbage trucks rumbling, early commuters hurrying past, life continuing despite the wreckage they'd made of yesterday's possibilities. The leak came from bank security, she said, holding up her phone. The reporter just sent me proof. Thornfield ordered surveillance on all your interactions. I know. My attorney called 20 minutes ago. Marcus's laugh was bitter, self-directed. Turns out paranoia makes a poor substitute for trust. Jasmine climbed through her apartment window and walked downstairs, bare feet silent on worn carpet, heart caught between hope and self-preservation. When she emerged onto the sidewalk, they stood facing each other like opponents in some ancient ritual, neither sure of the rules. I'm sorry, he said simply. Not sorry that I was wrong about the leak, sorry that I was wrong about you. Sorry that I took every wound I've ever received and used them as weapons against the first person in years who saw me as more than my bank balance. The apology hung between them, sincere but fragile. Jasmine studied his face, noting the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly from exhaustion and emotion. You hurt me, she said quietly. Not just with the accusations, but with how quickly you believed them. How easily you decided I was just another person trying to use you. I know. Do you? Because it wasn't just about trust, Marcus. It was about respect. About seeing me as capable of the same complexity you demand for yourself. Her voice grew stronger. You want people to see past your clothes and your skin color to the man underneath, but you reduced me to a stereotype the moment things got complicated. He flinched as if she'd struck him, the truth landing with surgical precision. You're right, and I don't know how to apologize for that level of blindness. You start by acknowledging it, which you just did. She took a half step closer, close enough to see the genuine remorse in his eyes. What happens now? I don't know, but I'd like to find out if you'll let me. He pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolling to a news article. The Tribune ran a follow-up story an hour ago, about Pinnacle's systemic issues, about employees like you who've witnessed discrimination but stayed silent to protect their jobs. You're quoted as an anonymous source. Jasmine's eyes widened. I never spoke to any reporter. I did. I called them at 4 a.m. and told them about the conversation I overheard between you and Thornfield yesterday. About how you've probably seen this kind of treatment before but couldn't speak out without risking your career. His smile was small but genuine. I also told them about the brilliant financial analyst who challenged me to choose justice over revenge, and how I was too proud and stupid to listen. Marcus, the account's staying open, but I'm requiring Pinnacle to implement diversity training, hire an external review board, and establish a fund for employees who report discrimination. Your MBA program's getting funded, along with a consulting contract once you graduate. He held up his hands before she could object. It's not charity. It's an investment in someone who can help build the systems we both deserve. The magnitude of it overwhelmed her, not just the financial support, but the public acknowledgement, the systemic change, the way he'd turned his wounded pride into purposeful action. And us? She asked, the question barely audible above the city's morning symphony. Us, he repeated, as if testing the word's weight. I'd like there to be an U.S. But I understand if I've broken something that can't be repaired. Jasmine thought about her grandmother's coffee can, about dreams deferred and trust earned, about the difference between love that lifted and love that demanded perfection. She thought about her mother's wisdom. Some people needed to learn how to lay down their weapons. I won't be your redemption project, she said carefully, and I won't be your proof that you've overcome your past. If there's going to be an us, it has to be because you see me as an equal partner, not as absolution for your guilt. I see you as the woman who made me want to be better than my worst impulses, he said, stepping closer. I see you as someone brave enough to challenge a billionaire in a diner, smart enough to see through my defenses, and generous enough to consider forgiving me for being human in the ugliest possible way. The morning sun caught the gold flecks in his brown eyes, and for a moment she saw past the wealth and the pain to the 8-year-old boy who'd lost everything and the man who'd built it all back through sheer determination. Coffee, she said finally. What? If you want to start over, we start with coffee. Rosie's Corner Diner. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. She turned toward her building's entrance, then paused. And Marcus? Next time you get scared, talk to me instead of talking yourself out of trusting me. As she disappeared into the building, Marcus stood alone on the sidewalk, hope spreading through his chest like sunrise. Tomorrow, they would sit across from each other in a cracked vinyl booth, surrounded by honest fluorescent light and the possibility of love built on truth rather than transaction. For the first time in years, he looked forward to being vulnerable. What happens when we choose to see the wounded person behind someone's worst behavior, and how might that choice transform both of us?